morning and welcome from Malaysia. My name is Jan Willem Moren. I am the co-host for this event, and I hope that you are as excited as I am for this webinar, The Future of Data Center Operations. I can't wait to hand over to our presenter today, but before I am going to do so, I would first like to introduce the team from EPI that is on board today. Apart from myself, we have David Go, who is the Regional Sales Manager for Asia Pacific region. And we also have Paige Pong, who is the Global Marketing Manager. And we have Dean Kutsia, who will be speaking to you in a short while. Dean has extensive experience in both the data center and IT industry for multiple decades, and he has worked in many parts of the world, being Asia, Africa, the Middle East, Europe, Asia, and the Pacific. Before joining EPI, he co-founded a company called DX Platforms, which specializes in modular data center solutions. Under the strategic leadership of Dean, the company was able to make a successful entrance to the stock exchange in Australia. So without further ado, I would like to hand over to Dean, who is the Chief Operating Officer of EPI. Dean, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Jan. That's much appreciated. I'll fire up the presentation that we'll be providing for everyone today. So, right, to kick things off, I think the main topic for today is actually going to be based on the future of data center operations and the DCOS standard that was developed, both by Jan, who's on the call today, and other key figures in the data center industry. So let me just make sure this is working. There we go. A little bit about EPI, for those of you who may be joining us for the first time. We've been in business now for 37 years. The company was originally founded in the UK in 1987, and our headquarters were moved to Singapore in 1999. We've got we're in over 60 countries through our global partner network and over 130 cities. We also have 11 EPI offices all over the world. So we've got broad coverage. And you have obviously been doing this for quite a long time now. So we focus on three key services. The first would be design validation. That would typically be on the design of the data center facilities themselves of all sizes. The other major service is audits and certifications. We would audit facilities for both DCOS and operations, but also construction certifications are provided and design certifications are provided. We're also very well known for training. A lot of people who'll be joining the call today would have been trained by EPI in the past, where we offer engineering training, operations training, and also training for some of the compliance certifications that we actually provide the audits for too. Now, we've obviously been around for quite a while, and over the years have won numerous awards. We're highly regarded within TIA as a certification body. Edward Van Leent, who's our CEO and the company founder, has been nominated for numerous awards over the years too. Now, the main topic for today is actually going to be focused predominantly on data center downtime. And I think, if you look at the industry as a whole and the way things have progressed over the last 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, we've gone from building out small server rooms to support IT departments into massive data centers that are well over 100 megawatts in size. So gone are the days where it's a small facility to support the IT department, and we're now effectively building power stations for the internet. 10 years ago, a 5 megawatt data center would have been considered a very large facility. These days, 5 megawatts isn't even the first phase of a data center that's being constructed. So the size of the facilities that are being constructed have obviously grown astronomically, and with that has obviously come a lot of complexity with the data center itself. Technology in the data center has also changed and evolved. Devices and plant and equipment are a lot more connected and to the network these days. Integration between them is a lot more complicated, and as a result, complexity overall has increased, It's not a case of throwing a couple of the guys from the IT department into the data center and having them manage these facilities anymore. It really does require a specialized approach from your operations teams. Now, what are the main causes of data center downtime? And it's actually human error. There's a lot of research that's been done on data center downtime specifically, and it varies. I mean, we don't see a consistent figure coming through, but a lot of it generally comes down to how they're interpreting or what they're relating that particular failure to. In many cases, it's systems failures, but often those system failures are a result of poor maintenance schedules and poor operations management by the teams that are managing these facilities. And if you look at some of the research, they estimate that up to 85% of all downtime is actually related specifically to human error. Now, that's also expensive. You know, downtime these days is often a national headline if you're a large business or a large operator, and the impact it can have on a business is huge. Whether you're a co-location operator or you're running an enterprise facility to support your own operations, you know, the phone is going to start ringing once email goes down. But, you know, these days, it's not even a case of just the phone ringing if email goes down. You've got the media knocking on your front door. We had a recent outage in Australia where Optus went down for about 9 hours, and the end result was, you know, train stations not being able to send people to work on time, and hospitals, you know, suffering with issues and all sorts. So you can imagine the brand reputation and that a company like Optus suffered when that happened. And what inevitably happened following that was regulators were stepping in. So downtime is something that is becoming, you know, increasingly expensive and a huge concern for businesses, and really not an option, particularly for those where we have to be online 24/7 these days. Now, what are the main causes of that downtime, particularly human-related downtime? We've conducted numerous audits over the years, and the same patterns have typically emerged through those audits. What we tend to find is that, you know, there's 4 key areas, that being that staff don't typically follow the procedures that they're supposed to, and management is often not aware of it. They sometimes think they are, perhaps they're not documenting it correctly, but there's actually no procedures in place, or the procedures that are in place are not being followed accurately. The other issue is that sometimes the individual processes are not at the right maturity level. So what you'll find is the processes that are in place might be suitable for a facility of a smaller size or of a certain design, but it's not necessarily the facility that they're currently in. If you're filling your operations team with people who've come from, you know, competitors or a different site, often they're bringing what they understood about operations from that particular site. And that then can obviously affect the processes and the execution of those processes in the facilities that they're operating in. The other is integration between the processes themselves. If that is insufficient, often that can lead to a breakdown in operation too. The other issue is obviously just human error. Sometimes people push the wrong button. And if there aren't processes in place to minimize the chances of that happening, as long with the actual impact of it, you know, the consequences of it can be significant. Now, the good news is that human error is predictable. And because it's predictable, we can develop processes, procedures, and training to prevent it. And if it happens, and when it does happen, minimizing the consequences of that human error. Now, we tend to refer a lot to the airline industry as a good example of what process and following process can offer. If you look at the safety record of the airlines and how that has improved over the years, most of that has come down to the fact that they're running an exorbitant amount of in-flight and pre-flight checklists. And, you know, over time, what that's resulted in is, you know, a far better safety record for the airline itself. So with that, I'd like to run you through the data center operations management framework that has been developed by EPI and in many ways forms the basis for the DCOS standard. Now, with EPI, we believe in what we call the 3 Ps. That's the product, the people, and the process. The product would be the facilities or the facility that you manage. Or the people will be the people that operate, maintain, or perhaps sell the space in the facility itself. And then it's the processes. How do we actually conduct the day-to-day? And that's what we'll be focusing on today. Now, an overview of the data center framework that was developed by EPI, you'll see on the screen right now. If you look right at the bottom, the data center infrastructure actually forms a very small component of that. But if you consider the amount that is invested in design and construction certifications and how much time and effort goes into planning the construction of the facility itself, very little time in comparison is actually spent focused on the operations of the facility long term. The construction project, while high risk, is generally only something that's going to last 2 to 3 years, and then you perhaps would be managing the expansion of the infrastructure. But it's the day-to-day management of these facilities where most of your problems tend to come. And it's why when you look at the framework as a whole, operations becomes something that requires far more focus and emphasis than what we tend to see in the industry right now. Now, an example of an operational framework, and what you're seeing here is an example of how important the correct integration of the different processes are. I'm not going to go into this in any detail. We could talk about this for hours, but you can see how processes are integrated and how they tend to be reliant on each other. And incorrectly executing on any individual process can often have a chain effect across the organization or the operations as a whole. Now, what are the key challenges? I mean, so if you're a data center facilities manager or you're in operations and you're wondering, all right, well, look, how do we manage this? Well, which processes are the most important and what level of detail do we actually need to drill down to with regards to these individual processes? Are we going to use automation? What level of automation are we going to use? How much does that automation potentially cost us? Is it an option if we're using older equipment and facilities? What sort of control mechanisms have we got in place? So these are all questions and challenges that we need to ask ourselves, because everyone on this call is going to be either involved with perhaps greenfield or brownfield developments, but you may also be operating existing data centers. You often inherit problems with the facilities that you're managing, and you're inheriting designs and constructed facilities that have been built a specific way. And you need to ensure that whatever operations or your processes are in place are actually designed for the specific facilities that you are managing. Now, the issue is too that there's very little integration between the facilities, the IT services, and the business management. That typically being sales. So often what you'll have is salespeople who are desperate to sell space, or IT teams that are desperate to build out their network infrastructure a specific way, but the facility isn't necessarily designed to support that. And as a result, you see very little integration between facilities and the rest of the business. That in itself leads to all kinds of risk that inevitably has an impact on the facility itself. Now, the issue is okay, well, we know there's challenges. We need to look for ways to solve these challenges. What are the best practices that we can look at? What are the guidelines or the standards? And what could be used as a reference for this? How do we achieve operational excellence when we are inheriting problems? Often we need to accept or deal with the facilities that we currently have. And we need to implement practices, but we're not quite sure which practices to focus on. What a lot of companies and operators have done is they've focused on ISO standards. The issue with a lot of the ISO standards is they're not specifically written for the data center environment. These are standards that are written and put together for the broader industry at whole. And what we're often trying to do is pigeonhole or use the ISO service specifically for data centers, even though it isn't necessarily written for data centers directly. And that often leaves huge issues because sometimes the consultants or the ISO auditors themselves, they're not familiar with data centers, or they've had very little exposure to them. They don't necessarily understand the commercial models or the practical reality of managing a data center. And that leaves a lot of room open to interpretation, which means it's incredibly challenging to deal with the consultants or actually achieve the ISO certifications that perhaps your clients require of you, or you might require for compliance reasons from management. The other issue with ISO is that it really is a black and white option. It's pass or fail. You don't have different levels for criticality. There's no progressive improvements that you can implement. It really is either pass or fail. And you also can't determine what is best to work on first. If you find that you might have issues with, facility with security, for example, you can't decide to work on that first if you're going for a particular ISO standard that is more worried about a different process. So that makes it equally challenging if you're trying to achieve these certifications. Data center operators are obviously at great risk because of all this. So you've got increased complexity, you've got various standards that you need to adhere to. You're often dealing with facilities, as I mentioned earlier, that perhaps you've inherited, or there's changes to the commercial equation that changes how you need to operate these facilities too. Which is why we developed DCOS. It's effectively a framework for data centers, particularly focused on operations. Now, to give you some insight into DCOS, what we did, we identified the key 11 disciplines that effectively govern how you should operate your data centers. And I won't go into too much detail on each individual discipline. However, you'll see how relevant they are when you read through this. Typically, what you'll find is that depending on the nature of your business or your organization or the facility that you're managing, some of these disciplines become more important. In some cases, they're less important. What's crucial, however, is that they all have a role to play in the management of your data center and the ongoing operations. Within those 11 disciplines, we then have sub-disciplines. So an example would be service level management. Service level management being one of the key disciplines. You would then drill down into that, and what you will see is that there's additional sub-disciplines which include things like your needs analysis or your business requirements. It could be complaint procedures and service reporting. Often what you'll find is that operations teams and management believe that their service level management policies and procedures are bulletproof, or that they have everything that they need in place. But what we tend to uncover when we actually complete audits is that there are massive gaps within each sub-discipline. And as a result, the impact of that on the organization can be immense. It doesn't take much for you to be in breach of a service level agreement and you're breaching contract with a client, and directors are being pulled into court, or you've got issues with non-disclosures, for example, that you might have in place with your clients. So all of these can have a massive consequential impact on the business and are often overlooked. Generally, they only tend to be something that people might address once it becomes an issue or once they're alerted to it. However, with the sub-disciplines and the different disciplines that we've got, as you work your way through it, we ultimately begin to identify where the gaps are. And unlike the ISO standards, which I mentioned earlier, we build DCOS around what we call a maturity model, which means that what we look at is the current state of operations and ways for you to gradually improve it. So an example would be DCOS 1, which would have very little documentation. Very little monitoring would be in place, no training, and almost no processes. And we gradually work up to what we would call a highly optimized data center, which would be integrated processes, a lot of automation within the data center itself. It starts from what we consider initial through to repeatable processes, well-defined, well-managed, and a highly optimized facility. To give you a summary of what the maturity level actually looks like, you'll see, maturity level 1 is highly reliant on people. And what we consider that is run by luck. If you're highly reliant on people, but you have very little documented, you don't have fixed processes in place, it's only a matter of time before you're likely to come up with a problem. As we run through the maturity model, what you'll find is that documented processes start to improve. Process deployments are better. Monitoring and control tends to improve too. Eventually, level 5 facility would have everything that it needs in place. Obviously difficult to achieve, particularly given the fact that most companies only tend to really focus on operations once they're into operations, and they do very little planning prior to the construction of their facility beyond initially building operational manuals and procedures. This often requires a constant work in progress, making sure staff are adequately trained and that they're implementing and executing on the policies and procedures that they've been given. But it does show that through a maturity level model, rather than a on-off type approach you would find with other certifications, you can gradually improve the operations of your facility rather than just being given a pass or fail in achieving certification. So how does DCOS fit into your business? Well, firstly, it's fully aligned with ISO. So it's not something that would run counter to a lot of the standards that many of you may already have or wish to pursue. If you're in the process of designing your data center or constructing your facility, DCOS fits in very well with the ISO standards you would like to achieve. Because it's already well aligned with so many of the ISO standards that you would be looking to achieve or may already have in place, it's not something that's going to cause any complexity to your operations, your manuals, your procedures. It's one that will fit in quite well with it and actually build on top of it. The difference being that because it's a maturity model, it allows you to also look to achieve some of these particular certifications if they're a requirement once you've actually implemented DCOS. So accurate implementation of DCOS will make it easier to achieve ISO certifications that you don't have. And any ISO certifications that you currently have are going to be aligned with the DCOS standard too. It's also ready to use. Straight out of the box, it's not a complicated standard. It's written in a very practical way, and it can be put to use immediately. It also comes with a lot of checklists. So from the start, when you initially implement this, what you can do is provide checklists to your people to actually focus on the day-to-day. Which simplifies the execution of those processes and procedures, and at the same time also eliminates a lot of the problems that tend to occur, as you remember when I mentioned earlier around human error, particularly with staff who are not executing on processes or procedures properly. This actually puts formal processes and procedures into place. It also provides an opportunity for progressive improvement. Now, this is something that is incredibly beneficial with the DCOS approach, because anyone who's operated a data center or worked in them knows that things change. You might expand your data center and find that you're using new equipment, or you've needed to make some adjustments perhaps to your service level agreements based on customer changes. Data centers often get acquired, which means that operational requirements may change. You might find that vendors are acquired, and that has an impact on your maintenance schedules or how you need to manage your contractors. The beauty with DCOS, its maturity-based model, is that you can actually adapt it to what your data center requires and what your business requires. Again, it's not like an ISO where we're going to come in and effectively grade you against a particular standard and it's pass or fail. The maturity model grades you against the DCOS standard, but we look at your execution of those particular disciplines and sub-disciplines within DCOS, and that ultimately provides you with a framework to improve your operations gradually and steadily. So you get to decide which disciplines are most important for you. Is it security? Is it service level management? Is it data center operations or facilities management? All of that is dictated and determined by you as the operator and the owner of the data center. You can also target the maturity level for each discipline too. So you might feel that certain disciplines are not as important as others. And as a result, you can focus your time, your energy, and your staff's resources into the areas which are most important for you. And then there's the overall maturity level that you're looking to achieve. Are you looking for, maturity level of 3? Is it something you believe would add value for your clients or tenants in the data center? Are you perhaps a financial institution where you need to have a slightly higher maturity level for insurance requirements? All of this is catered and designed around trying to provide the clients and the operators with the kind of operational control that's required from the business's perspective. So rather than having the standard drive your business, you decide what's best for your particular facility within the DCOS standard and framework, and then you take it from there. Now, what that allows us to do, and I'll run you through the steps. You would read the DCOS standard itself to understand the larger picture. You would determine which disciplines and domains to improve. You would perform a gap analysis or an audit of your current operations. You would then prepare a realistic action plan, and as we like to say, celebrate success. So in a nutshell, we would typically conduct an audit for our clients of their existing operations. We would then sit down with you and try to fundamentally understand what are the most important disciplines and domains for you, your facility, and your business. We would then actually complete a gap analysis and conduct an audit of your site, which would mean spending time on the ground with your team and actually having a good look at what they're doing day to day. Off the back of that, we'll actually prepare an action plan for you then to implement. We would then expand the scope once that's been done to improve the maturity and maintain what you've done. And that could be done through consistent annual surveillance audits. So what's the process that we run through? Well, the first is that we'll complete a desktop audit, which is a remote audit of your operations. And we'll actually review what process documents you currently have in place. Once that's been done, we'll review the details of those particular processes. What follows then is an on-site audit. That on-site audit is obviously arranged with you and conducted either with you or your staff, and we then sample all the execution evidence. So we'll actually have a look at how your staff are following their own procedures on site. They'll take us through things, and we can effectively build our reports off that. We also review all the documentation that you've got. We see where you're strong and where you're weak, again, against the DCOS framework and standards. And we also conduct thorough interviews with select staff. Now, both stage 1 and stage 2, it's a report that we'll actually provide, which will show you the potential gaps and the maturity levels for each discipline and sub-process. And that's delivered through a spider chart. So a good example here is when you look at the high-level view. The high-level view is based on the 11 disciplines. So after we've completed an audit, we can show you where you're strong and where you're weak. So in this particular case, where you see the blue line, that means the client was targeting a maturity level, or a level of 3 is their desired maturity level. What you'll find is that, for example, with project management and security management, in this customer example, they were better than a maturity level of 3, but you'll find that they were weaker in other areas. Monitoring and reporting was something that needed a lot of work. They have very little organizational resilience, for example, with this particular client example. So we'll also do the same when we drill down into the disciplines themselves. So within each discipline, you have the sub-disciplines. And then what we'll do is we'll actually grade each of those disciplines and sub-disciplines in a similar fashion. So again, with this client example, they're chasing a maturity model of 3, they're rated 3. And you'll find that their service level agreements are just not up to scratch. They're sitting with potential contract risk. It could be complaint procedures are well managed in this case, but customer satisfaction isn't. So all of this is done with the client, where we go into a deep dive on their operations as a whole, and the report that comes back provides a comprehensive overview of how well aligned you are with DCOS as a whole, and which areas you can actually focus on for improvement. So the areas that you would like to focus on, you can then invest time and resources on those particular areas. If your business requirements or your commercial requirements don't require adherence or excessive investment in a particular discipline or sub-discipline, you don't need to focus on that. what you can focus on in the areas that are most important. This also has a huge impact on how you operate the data center day to day, because what it means is if you're managing a large operations team, or perhaps in the case of many people at the moment, you don't have the resources that you need, you can focus your time and attention on what's most important. And as a result, you can also start to make minor improvements to your operations over time that will yield large results. So sometimes it's not worthwhile investing excessively into one particular discipline or sub-discipline, but other times you'll see noticeable and measurable results simply by improving a few sub-disciplines that could have an enormous positive impact on operations as a whole. And ultimately, you determine what the best way is to do this. It's not someone coming from an ISO certification body telling you, oh, no, you're not doing this right, you're not going to get your certification. This is a far more realistic and pragmatic approach to managing operations as a result. The other thing that I wanted to cover today is the development of runbooks. Now, EPI can actually help develop runbooks based on the DCOS standard. These are effectively out of the box, customized specifically for your environment. It's a way to effectively implement best practice standards on day one. And we can assist clients to complete this through all stages, through design, construction, existing operations, potential acquisitions that you might be considering. It also allows you to consolidate multiple facilities and also set KPIs for operations teams and facilities managers. So the best way to describe the runbooks are, and anyone that has been involved in the construction or the development of a data center knows that runbook creation, particularly manuals and procedures, is a very, very time-consuming process. This is something that can incur an excessive amount of cost and is often fraught with risk. It's difficult to determine when the best place is to start. Often it's reliant on, the vendor feedback and third-party consultants. And as a result, when you eventually switch the lights on, you often tend to end up with, operations that are perhaps not well aligned with what you actually have. And then it becomes a case of trial and error, and the team that you've hired fixing things almost as they go. The other issue that we've got, and it's something that I think a lot of people will be feeling pain with, is that there are staff shortages and significant staff shortages. It's becoming increasingly hard to find experienced operational people. So often what you're doing is you're finding people are moving, between companies, and you often inherit or hire people that are coming into a facility with a certain way of doing things. Often the way they've come in is based on perhaps what they've learned at other facilities that they've worked at. They bring sometimes those good habits, but also bad habits with them. And that then starts to have an impact on operations because they start to have an influence over your policies and procedures and the way they think the facility should be run. If your operations manual wasn't written in advance and those instructions were not provided in advance to staff, you often have an issue where things begin to drift. The other major issue that you've got is that, a lot of companies now, particularly larger hyperscalers, but also large operators, are using facilities management companies quite a lot. The problem again with that is, while it helps alleviate some of the concerns with finding people, which is a challenge, it also means that you're exposed to them to some degree, because the issue that you've got is that it's hard enough going out to RFP and knowing exactly what you need to ask for. The other issue is whether or not they're actually executing on what they said they would and how you can manage those particular facilities managers. With DCOS in place, what it allows you to do is develop, an operational runbook that's yours. You can use that to issue RFPs to the broader market. You can then have a company like EPI come in and complete a third-party assessment annually of the consultants or the facilities managers that you've engaged with. And we can make sure that what they're doing is what they're supposed to be doing on a day-to-day basis, and you'd have a third-party report. The same could be said for staff and their KPIs. It's often hard to know whether or not staff are doing what they're supposed to be doing. In many cases, it's hard to know what training to provide them if you're not sure of where they might be coming up short. Everyone wants to do the best job they can, but sometimes a lot of it is just based on what you know or what training you've had or where you've come from. And it's hard for management teams to know how to deal with that or solve that challenge. if they haven't got a framework to start with. What this does is actually provides you with a baseline, and you can then build off the top of this baseline. The other problem it solves, and it's one that we're seeing is a huge issue at the moment, is that we need companies that are acquiring facilities, often in the same country, but sometimes across multiple regions. They are inheriting all sorts of problems with the facilities they have to manage. So you've got the finance guys and management up top going ahead, guns blazing, acquiring data centers, and the operations teams are left with an absolute mess, trying to figure out how to integrate these new data centers, how to manage them accordingly. And that means that customers are incurring all sorts of contract risk. What a runbook would allow you to do is effectively consolidate your entire operations, all your operations and procedures across all your different facilities. And again, because it's a maturity model, it means that what we can effectively do is, based on what's required for that particular facility, you can manage it accordingly, but all within the same framework. It then also gives you a baseline to provide training to your staff too, which is obviously something that EPI, provides, and everyone knows us quite well for. Once you've completed the initial audit, we'll provide you with a certificate of conformity. This is something that, much like a data center construction or design certification, is something you can put on the wall. It shows your customers that you've actually gone through a third-party audit of your processes, and you can guarantee a certain amount of uptime. You can obviously share some of the reports that we provide you with your clients when it's required. You can also show them how strong you are in certain areas, and it's a good way to demonstrate competitive differences. You'll find that particularly people who are having to try and sell space in commercial co-location facilities, being as competitive as it is, it's a lot of customers now looking beyond just design and construction certification, because they realize it's the day-to-day operations where most of the problems come. For the most part, engineering experience is at a stage now where we're seeing very little downtime from actual design itself. It's not like in the old days where someone would be trying something relatively new and there'd be a failure because of it. Now it's more a case of, okay, well, we know the design of the facility is going to be up to scratch. We understand the standard certifications for design and construction well enough, but can the people that you've got on site actually manage the facility appropriately? Well, what the certificates will actually do for you is provide, that comfort to your clients too. There's also a lot of industry recognition for DCOS. Look, we've implemented DCOS across very large clients globally. As I mentioned earlier, we've got 11 offices. So we've delivered this in a lot of countries on most continents now. And as a result, it's highly recognized, and one that's growing in recognition as more and more customers actually adopt DCOS. So what are the main advantages of DCOS? Look, it's going to align your data center operations with your business requirements. I've focused on that quite heavily through this talk today, but it's important to emphasize this because I think so often we get caught up, as I mentioned earlier, in design and construction, but we never really look at what the business requirements are for the data center itself. So while we're focused on design and making sure that we're rated 3 or rated 4 and that the facility is built within a certain time period, very often operations is a bit of an afterthought. And because the industry's evolved and data centers are becoming more complex, it's also commercial models that are becoming complex. If you look at the co-location industry itself now, again, it used to be you'd be buying racks and power. These days, that's not the case. You've got some operators that are looking to move up the stack and offer more bare metal services or cloud services. You've got others that are only offering floor space. So the end result of that really comes down to, all right, well, what does the business require? And how do we make sure that the DCOS standard or the standards that we're implementing support our business rather than hinder them? And a lot of people on this call who would have gone through standards certifications before would have felt the pain where you are kind of held with your feet to the fire by a standards authority telling you that you need to design or build a specific way, but often it's not well aligned with your business requirements. I think TIA as a design standard has solved a lot of those challenges with design and construction, but with DCOS in particular, the fact that we're so flexible in how we implement it is the main reason why it offers so many advantages to our clients, because it's aligned with commercial requirements, not just technical requirements. It's also adaptable. So it doesn't matter if you're running a massive hyperscale facility that's over 300 megawatts, or you've got a site that's only 100, 200 kilowatts. Often you'll find a lot of companies are having to manage sites of various sizes, which means different size staffing teams, different staffing requirements, different levels of skill for staff. Realistically, for DCOS, the way you can implement it, you can adapt it to the size of your facility. And again, as I mentioned earlier, you can base it all on what your actual business processes and requirements are, rather than being led by the technical design or technical installations that you've inherited. It's also progressive. Look, we spent a bit of time discussing that already, but it really does need to be emphasized. It's not a case of pass or fail. I think there's been some initial apprehension with particularly operations managers who are worried that they're going to get a report from us that really is just going to show whoever they're reporting into how terrible they are. That's not the point of this. The point of this is to show you how you can make minor improvements and major improvements, sometimes through small incremental changes. And you can do it within the budgets that you have. You can do it with the staffing resources that you've got. Sometimes it could be something as simple as making a change to a contractor that you're using. It could be making some adjustments to your maintenance schedules. Little things can make huge improvements. And as a result, this actually gives you projects that you can work on internally to gradually improve operations over time. The next thing, and probably one of the most important, is risk reduction. Obviously, downtime is an issue. We focused a little bit on that earlier, but risk reduction is difficult to achieve once your facility is live and operating, because downtime isn't an option, which makes it hard to make changes to your facility itself. But operational changes are often easier to implement because most of the time it's simply process, or it's making sure that staff are following a certain procedure. Those are easy to implement, and they are the quickest ways to reduce overall risk for your facility. If you've acquired or you've inherited a facility, or you've taken on a new data center and something has been designed this particular way, it often cannot be rectified without a huge cost involved or the risk of potential downtime in rectifying the issue. However, operational policies and procedures can be changed. Sometimes minor adjustments, as I mentioned earlier, will often yield really positive results. So it's a great way to reduce overall risk for your data center, regardless of the technical reality that you might be dealing with. The other big issue is obviously regulatory and business compliance. And look, DCOS is well suited to helping solve those challenges. We're seeing regulators get heavily involved in the industry across all phases of it. Climate is obviously a massive one at the moment, which we're all struggling with. But there's other regulatory pressure now too. Again, I mentioned earlier, there was downtime with Optus recently in Australia, and regulators are going to step in. They can't afford to have, transport networks going down and hospitals unable to service people who are on life support. So the fact that we're living in such a highly integrated world these days means that data centers are going to be under the spotlight, and increasingly so. And as a result, compliance is becoming an issue. That's also having a huge impact on things like insurance costs. Sometimes SLAs are written around your ability, or sometimes your SLAs, for example, require certain insurances to be in place, and insurance requirements will have you need to demonstrate that you're at a certain operational level. So this stuff is not going to go away. It's only going to increase, and something that DCOS is well positioned to help you navigate. So that's it from our side. I wanted to make sure we had adequate time for questions. We tend to get quite a lot through these presentations. So if we don't have sufficient time to get through any of the questions that we don't address today, we'll be happy to arrange one-on-one meetings with you, or even address them over email. So the first question was from Rayanne Rodriguez. Rayanne, we are experiencing high cost of monthly power consumption in our data center. The possible factors in old cooling technology and mixing hot and cold air issues. Do you think it might be helpful to reduce our power costs using the DCOS approach? Also, the second question, may we know if DCFC, CDNC, and CDFS are different certifications? Yes. Okay. So on the training certifications, they are different. We've got obviously the CDCP, which you mentioned, CDCS and CDCE are aimed particularly at as an engineering discipline. The operations disciplines is CDFOS and CDFOM. So they are different certifications, and highly recommended. Predominantly, if you're on this call today, operations is a key focus for you, something that you certainly want to be considering for your staff. The CDFOM and CDFOS are very well aligned with DCOS at the same time. So implementing DCOS and sending your staff on this particular training, everything's well aligned with it. Yes, you can reduce the cost of monthly power consumption through more efficient design, but also management. Adequate monitoring is going to make a huge difference, making sure that the guys in the NOC are on top of what they need to be on top of. So yes, policies and procedures will have a huge impact. In fact, environmental sustainability is one of the key disciplines that we're focused on, and a lot of that falls within this question. So the next question was from Dennis Sim. He asked, it was said that ISO standards not specifically written for the DC. How is it different from the TIA standard, and what criticality? Jan, I think best if you answer that one. So the question is the ISO standards are not specifically written for data centers, but how is it different from the TIA standard, and what criticality level is available?
Yeah, correct. Yeah. I think they are two fundamentally different standards. The TIA 942, for which the new version might be coming very soon, by the way, is focusing on design and build. So it's the first two phases of the data center life cycle. And once you are ready to start operating as per day one, that's where, as the word is referring to, operations take over. So for operations to start, it would be more appropriate to look into DCOS. And of course, some of the ISO standards can still be very helpful. Yeah, where particularly ISO standards might shine is for looking at, let's say, core security aspects or service management aspects. But when it comes to core data center aspects, such as data center operations, facilities management, that is where the DCOS is fundamentally different from all the ISO management standards. So again, TIA is focusing on design and build, and DCOS is focusing on operations. So two different parts of the life cycle.
Thanks, Jan. The other question we got was from Weehor. How long is the validity of the certification? Is it yearly? Jan, I think perhaps best if you answer that one too.
Sure. Yep. Similar as ISO management systems, certification is valid for 3 years with annual surveillance audits. And then once the cycle is up, recertification kicks in. Practically, certification audit is on-site. Surveillance audits can be done remotely, and then recertification is on-site, and then again it goes back to remote. So it's in principle annual audit, but the certificate is valid for 3 years.
Perfect, thank you. Another question from Vin. The presentation provided useful information. Thank you. Glad you got something from it. Could you sum up key points to minimize human errors? Look, that's difficult because I think, obviously it's a very comprehensive standard, and human error is hard to quantify, I guess, in a few sentences. I think the best way to minimize human error is to make sure that you have processes in place and that you're actually making sure that staff are following those processes. So what DCOS is going to do is provide you with those processes. And then what we can do is conduct surveillance audits to ensure that those processes are being followed. At the same time, too, you can complete internal audits and assessments of your staff to make sure that they're following those processes too. So the key thing is making sure that staff are doing what they're supposed to be doing and that they've been trained accordingly and they understand what's required of them, and that management is staying on top of their reporting. DCOS will allow you to do that, which is obviously one of the main reasons why a lot of our customers have pursued the certification for it. Vin had a question. DCOS 3 will cover fully 11 disciplines. Vin, it's up to you to determine how many disciplines you want. We obviously always recommend all 11. The way to look at it is that DCOS 1 or DCOS 5, you could still have 11 disciplines through any DCOS level. What's ultimately up to you is to determine which disciplines you would like us to cover. and then we'll help you achieve the maturity level that you need to be rated accordingly. So if you wanted to be at level 3 for all 11 disciplines, we can do that. If there was only 3 or 4 disciplines you wanted to look at, we could do that. And the reason for that is you'll often find that there's some sites where there's a commercial requirement where it might be a light type facility and they only need 3 or 4 disciplines. They don't need them all. So really what we do is we look at your business as a whole, we try and understand what you require commercially, and then we help you within that particular framework. We've got a question from Adam. What is the price for this DCOS? Adam, it is based on size, but also time requirements. So look, it's typically done as a consulting engagement where we'll look at the time that's required to complete the audits and the assessments. You know, the more well put together you are with your own documentation, the less time we need to spend on site. If it's something that requires a lot of work, it can obviously increase in cost, but we can provide proposals and quotations. And look, it's very competitive. I think, you know, everyone will know what else is out there at the moment. We're about a quarter of the price compared to what you might be seeing from other standards authorities. So no, very, very competitive price wise. And it's a service we're delivering all over the world too. So even in developing countries where purchasing power tends to be a little lower, there's been a huge uptake in DCOS as a whole. Benoit asked, does DCOS define a kind of ranking on the run books? Yeah, it would do. I mean, look, it's up to you to determine what level you'd like to achieve with a run book, and then we can provide you with the procedures and processes to achieve that particular ranking. You won't be given it until we've conducted an audit. What we need to do is make sure that the staff are actually executing on it. So we would provide a run book, and then 6 months later, we would come along and we would actually conduct an audit and make sure that the execution of those processes and procedures were aligned with what you were provided. And then based on that, we would be able to give you a rating, is how it would work. If you've got any more questions, Benoit, look, please drop us an email. I'll be happy to sit down and run you through it in a bit more detail. The next question from Ravindran. What about quality management during construction time? Jan, perhaps you can answer that one. I'm not sure.
Well, honestly, I'm not sure either.
Okay.
It's a little bit straightforward. If there's more to elaborate on, more than happy to look into it. But from the question itself, I have the impression that it's need focusing on design and build. And of course, while you are designing and building, you need to have quality management in place. First of all, from the customer point of view, so someone needs to manage the project. There needs to be oversight, but especially when you're looking at large data centers that need to be designed and built, it would be recommended to consider external parties to assist you in the oversight of quality management. It's typically something that we do as well. We are doing design validation and of course constructed facility certification as well. To the point, of course, that this can help you preventing spending a lot of money, where at the end of the day, the vendor is going to say, well, yeah, G customer, we did what you were asking and we cannot be blamed. You can all prevent this by having design validation and constructed facility certification in place.
Great, thanks. Next question was from Weehor again. How much will DCO certification help operators improve on ESG metrics reporting? A ton, an absolute ton. So look, one of the biggest issues that you've got, particularly with ESG at the moment, is that it expands beyond just what your environmental impact may be as a business. They're looking at broader issues. So things like service level agreements and service level management becomes incredibly important. But all of the stuff will help a ton with reporting, because you're going to have detailed reports that you'll be able to provide to ensure you're as well aligned with the ESG requirements as possible. So I think you would probably struggle to find, particularly when it comes to data center operations, a standard that's probably better suited to ESG reporting, simply because of the level of detail that we provide. So if you saw the spider charts, for example, how we drill down into the different sub-disciplines, it's going to be very well suited to ESG reporting, and something we've been mindful of, with the way we put our reports together too. From Michael, is DCOS updated annually? How often? Look, like all standards, Michael, it goes through revisions from time to time. It is a genuine standard. It's not a guideline, and which means that we need to go through a peer review process before adjustments are made to the standard. There's a committee of industry experts, that get together and discuss the standard and make adjustments to it. Jan has been heavily involved in the development of the standard, and holds a senior role within the committee. Jan, if you want to expand a little bit more on it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I would like to add a bit more to it. I so happen to be the chairman of the committee, so I know all the insights. We are planning to initiate the next revision at the end of this year. So we hope to get the committee together either at the end of this year or early next year for the next version of DCOS. And with that said, if you feel that you can contribute to the standards, then by all means get in touch with us, and we can see if you can have a seat on the committee, so that you can actually influence how the standard should look like for the next version.
Fantastic. Thanks, Jan. Adam, was a question: how can my company assist EPI to help our existing DC client make their DCOS certified? Adam, we can work with you to support your customers. So we often engage as a third party with consulting companies to assist them with this. Just reach out to us. So drop me an email, or Jan an email, or Paige an email, or David, who's on the call too, and we're happy to sit down with you with your client requirement, so we can go in, provide the assessments for you, and have you front it with your client. You know your client better than we do. We can help you with it. That's not a problem. Ty had a question: what is the typical estimated time for coordination steps from beginning until obtaining DCOS certification? Ty, that's a hard question to answer, simply because every facility and operations, is different. But a general rule of thumb, I mean, look, we're busy with a very large project at the moment in Europe, where we had to develop runbooks for a customer that's got over 30 different data center sites. That took us about 4 months, and we're almost complete with that now. There's been certain facilities where the audit we could complete within a couple of weeks, and a report is provided within a couple of weeks, and it's given them a place to start. So it really does require, it does depend on what we're looking at with regards to the size of the site, the complexity of the site, the number of the sites. But it's not a huge coordination process. Really what it is we'll sit down with you, we'll have a meeting with you to understand exactly what your requirements are, and then most of it comes through the gap analysis. Off the back of the gap analysis in the report, you'll get what you need. So look, again, please reach out to us, and we can help you with that. Adam, another question: maybe for hosting facilities, the benefits from DCS, how government body who run their own DC, what certification is best for them? Look, government bodies benefit. The way to look at the certification is it's effectively confirmation that your facility is operating to a certain level. I think the point I've been trying to emphasize through the talk today is that the benefit moves beyond just the certification. You can get a stamp on the wall saying your data centers are being managed a specific way. But at the end of the day, most of your risk when it comes to operating a data center isn't just in the construction and design, it's actually the day-to-day operations. And unless you really know what's going on a ground level, day-to-day with your staff, you never know when problems are going to hit. No one thinks downtime is going to hit them until they get hit by it. And there's always a million excuses when it does hit whose fault it was. The best thing to do is try and get ahead of these problems. And the best way to get ahead of these problems is to get, an independent assessment done, where you've got no one with a direct stake or any skin in the game in the business telling you where you're going right and where you're going wrong. And that's what DCOS does. So yes, while it's good to be able to show customers that we're certified to a certain level, and it certainly helps you secure tenants, or it's good for a government department where maybe you want to show, people that you're reporting into that you might be compliant. What it's really going to do is ensure that you don't have an issue with downtime. Again, there is regulatory pressure that's building though around operations. I mean, we've already seen it with, you look at Indonesia, for example, even Malaysia. What you're finding is that, there's government pressure coming onto operators of data centers that the facilities need to be built to a certain standard to guarantee uptime. Operations is a part of that. So I don't think it's anything that's going away, and the DCOS certainly solves that problem. From Christian, is DCOS a training course? No. So look, Christian, DCOS is a standard. DCOS is the standard that we conduct audits for, and we can then provide you a report to see how well aligned you are with the standard, and effectively provide you with a snag list to show you areas where you can improve. We do offer training, which is the CDFS, CDFOM, and CDSS, as you rightly point out. The FOS and the FOM. The FOM is for facility managers. ESS is the environmental sustainability. So yeah, look, they separate. They separate.
Just
But as I
to
mentioned earlier,
just
they're
to add
well
on, just to add on, the CDFOM and CDFOS are fully aligned with the standard. So arguably, they are talking around operations, but while doing so, aligned to the DCOS standard.
perfect. Thanks, Jan.
Yeah. In general, I would suggest stay tuned to the EPI website. Announcements will be made at some point later this year. I can't say much right now, but stay tuned and you'll be in for more information later on.
Okay, so Benoit, another question. Can we get DCOS certification for specific customer room service level and shared customer data center facilities? Benoit, sometimes. Look, a lot of the larger hyperscale facilities are built for multi-tenant usage, where operations can be separated. Again, we would need to understand more about the specific facility itself to be able to answer that. So look, please reach out. Why don't we sit down and we can have a conversation about what your requirements are, what challenges you're dealing with, and we can see where we can help you. And Guan had another one for us. If a customer applies DCOS for their data center phase 1, when they expand do they need DCOS for phase 2? No. It's again, the surveillance audits solve that problem for you. So there's no need to constantly go through endless audits every time you expand. We'll conduct surveillance audits and make the adjustments for you. It's why the surveillance audits are so important. Often one of the questions we get is, well, we've already paid for a certification. Why do we need surveillance audits or we need to complete recertification? It's for this reason. Sites evolve and change over time. They expand gradually because we're trying to manage capital allocation. So we'll conduct most of that through the surveillance audits. Another question. Out of the 11 disciplines, if only 3 achieve level 5 and the rest level 3, that means overall level is 3?
No.
Yep.
No, that's not how it works. So you cannot compare this to, say, the TIA 942. Of course, as an operator, you are looking at a target. So let's say your target is level 5, but there are a number of disciplines where you fall short. Now, then it's up to you to say, okay, am I going to implement corrective actions for those disciplines where I fall short and still meet my level 5, or am I going to leave it as it is? So ultimately, the certificate will be issued with any maturity level that you achieve. But of course, most customers, if not all customers, are saying, look, when I started this exercise, my target was maturity level 4. There is one discipline falls short to level 3. I will first implement the corrective actions until I get the green light that I can move forward to level 4. And then I wait until the certificate is issued so that all targets are achieved on the certificate. But again, if you wish to do so, you could opt to say for 2 disciplines, I want maturity level 2. And for another 5 disciplines, I want maturity level 4. That is entirely up to you. So it is very flexible in terms of how many disciplines you choose and for which maturity level you wish to opt for each discipline. But again, most organizations, if not all, they go for the maturity level across the board. So they say 5 disciplines, maturity level 3. There is one exception that you need to understand. If you would like to achieve level 5 maturity, then you need to go for all 11 disciplines. And the reason is the key word is integration, and you can only achieve integration if you adopt all 11 disciplines. And yes, there are a few sites in the world that are certified DCOS maturity level 5, 11 disciplines.
Yep. Right. YY, does EPI look into integrating DCS processes over existing ISO 27001? No, look, it's aligned with ISO. So generally, efficient execution of DCOS means that you're going to be well aligned with ISO. I think, Jan, probably best if you answer that.
Look, the keyword here is scope. So some of our customers are certified ISO 27001. that does not necessarily mean that they automatically conform to the security requirements in DCOS. Yeah. So the security requirements in DCOS are focusing on data center operations, and therefore typically focusing on how you operate the physical security of a data center. Some of our customers, they are ISO 27001 certified, but for example, for cybersecurity, which is a bit of a different scope. But some of the processes, they still overlap, and therefore it could sometimes be an easy tick in the box. Yeah? So regardless, for both, you need to have a risk management process in place. So if you have that already for ISO 27001, you certainly have it also for DCOS. Yeah, but certain sub-disciplines, they could be different compared to ISO 27, or for example, even service management ISO 20000. So they are sometimes add-on, other times they are similar. It depends on scope. Scope is the key word here.
Thanks, Jan. Christian asked how many DCs have been DCOS audited and certified. Oof. Well, we must be well north of 80, 90 by now, I would think. I mean, look, with regards to that question, we're doing multiple sites with customers. So we've got one customer in Europe at the moment. There's over 30. We can get you a full list of them. Christian, if you're looking for some references, we can provide you with references relevant to your particular market. Please reach out to us and let us know. We'd be happy to provide them. But yeah, there's plenty. Well, there are plenty. It's been full steam ahead.
In addition, apart from certification, we have also performed numerous assessments for customers who do not wish to be certified. So it's not just certification only.
Yeah,
there are some customers who want the assessment, but they are not necessarily want the certificate on the wall. And those are, of course, not publicly available. So the number that you see on our website, where you can see the number of sites certified, is significantly higher because a number of customers are simply not seeking certification.
Final question from VJ. Since DCOS is a standard, is there a documented standard that we can read or refer to? Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely.
So it's available on our website. But please just drop David an email. He'll arrange a free copy for you, VJ. So if you reach out to him, he can arrange to get you a copy of it. Are there any data centers in Shanghai, China, certified by DCOS? I'm actually not sure. Have we done any in Shanghai, Jan?
I'm not sure in Shanghai, but there are some data centers in China. They are certified. In China, we are working with a partner. This is because of language barriers. The partner, however, is fully trained on DCOS. But if you ask me right now on the spot, is it in Shanghai? I could not answer you. I need to look it up. But again, there are DCOS certified data centers in China.
The next question was, is it possible to get the EPR DCOS audit certification for one data center site and the same certification can be recognized at other sites? No, look, unfortunately not. The certifications provided for the site that we've audited. So we need to ensure that the facility is being managed in accordance with DCOS.
Can I add on to that?
Sure.
Since the question may not be popped in a correct way, I could imagine that the question evolves around, I have one runbook for multiple sites. So that makes it, of course, different. So if you have 5 sites, then there is a possibility that we perform the main certification at one site, but we still have to sample evidence in the other sites. So the requirement, of course, is that you use one operations runbook for all the sites. Other than that, you have to follow the answer that Dean has provided just.
Jan, I think this will be a good question for you too. If a data center has managed to achieve the EPR DCOS certification, and DCOS also has some domains that are very well aligned with ISO, such as 27001, 14001, then is it automatically that the data center complies with those ISO certifications? If so, with one price of DCOS, then the data center can get DCOS and ISO certifications.
Yeah. Well, again, just because an existing site is having ISO certification does not make you necessarily qualify for the same discipline in DCOS. I tried to explain just now that while a site is having existing 27001 certification, it all depends on the scope. And the scope could be fundamentally different to what DCOS is requiring. Furthermore, it is also depending on the auditor findings. I, for that matter, have been involved in auditing sites whereby the site has been granted an ISO 27001 certification, but from a DCS point of view, I could not find the evidence required, nor for DCS, nor for even 27001. Just for the record, I am also a lead auditor for 27001, so I know my expertise in the field in that sense. We cannot say upfront, because the ISO certification is there, you automatically receive a tick in the box for the same discipline in DCOS. We still need to go through the audit. Having that said, if you really have your stuff well in order, it could practically become a walk in the park. But again, some sites easy, other sites more difficult.
Well, that is most of the questions. We've gotten through all of them. Look, I'd like to thank everyone who attended today and gave us, our 15 minutes of your time so we could present DCOS to you. It's much appreciated. And look, again, we have to go through what could be a very lengthy presentation quite quickly. So there's times where we've had to gloss over things relatively quickly, and other times where we've been able to focus on the key elements. I think what's important is to emphasize that, look, we're available to anyone if you've got any other questions. By all means, please reach out to David, who's one of our leading sales guys in the regions that everyone who's attended today covers. But both myself, Jan, and also Paige are available to you. So please reach out. Happy to hop on one-on-one calls or arrange additional presentations for you. If you've got any questions, don't be shy. And thanks again, everyone. It was much appreciated.
It's been our pleasure having you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.